4 years without seeing a woman. The German soldiers, unable to contain their inner restlessness, they went straight up and planted a hard kiss on the woman in the poster to cool off from the heat stirring inside them. The soldiers headed to the river for a bath. Just then, 3 French women happened to walk by. The soldiers couldn't believe their eyes. Excited, they waved and shouted, doing everything they could to get the women's attention, but the French women didn't even glance their way. Seeing that they were about to leave, the soldiers quickly pulled out their most treasured possessions, bread and sausages. That finally made the women stop. Ever since the war began, they hadn't had a single bite of bread in 4 years. One of the women speaking in broken German, at night, they could bring bread and sausages and visit their house. The soldiers were beyond thrilled, but after the excitement, they ran into a new problem. The women were only 3. But they were 4 men. No one wanted to give up this rare opportunity. So while the young recruit was fast asleep, the older soldier seized the moment and snuck out. That night they brought bread and cheese for the women. The women who hadn't had bread in 4 years immediately started eating like crazy. Once everyone was full and satisfied, the women kept their promise and showed their gratitude to the soldiers. After a brief moment of peace, the war raged on again. In the chaos, Paul was struck by a bullet. Veteran soldier Kat quickly dragged him to cover. When the battle ended, Paul was put on a train and sent to the rear for medical treatment. His comrades all looked at him with envy, because this non-fatal injury not only kept them away from the brutal battlefield, but also allowed them to rest for another half a month after it healed. Then Paul was sent to a field hospital. After some time, his wounds healed completely, but war had changed him. At first he had longed for battle, now he had grown to resent it. He decided to go home and see his family, but his father, completely unaware of war's horrors, only boasted to the neighbors about how his son was a war hero. Disheartened, Paul decided to cut his leave short and return to the front lines to fight alongside his comrades. But as one by one his friends were lost to war, Paul's heart grew heavier. He began to hate the war more and more. One day Paul sat alone in the trench. Suddenly a little bird flew from the distance. Paul quickly took out paper and pencil, wanting to capture the beauty of this moment. Just as Paul was completely focused on drawing, he suddenly stood up. Out of nowhere a gunshot rang out. Paul eventually collapsed in the trench. That day in the frontline command's report, it only wrote 5 words: all quiet on the Western Front.